Welcome to Dr. Carole's Couch with your host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. All comments, views, and opinions are solely those of Dr. Lieberman, her guests, and callers. Now it's time to have a seat on Dr. Carole's Couch. Here's your host, Dr. Carole Lieberman.
And welcome to today's edition of Dr. Carole's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. Well, today we're going to have a very important show. In case you don't know, I'm sure you don't know as much as my guest does about this, but everybody, this is not just a New York City problem. It's an American problem, because what's happening in New York City is threatening to happen all over America. And as some of you know already, I'm born and bred. I was born and bred in New York City, and my heart is still there. And my heart has been breaking as I have seen, I read the New York Post every morning, start with that. And as I have been seeing the damage that Mayor Mamdani has been doing to New York, it has been breaking my heart. Well, today, my guest is someone who can tell us this even more, because she's living it. She's living the dream. She's living the nightmare in New York. Today's show is called Leaving Marxist Russia to Come to New York City, Only to Find It's Worse. Today's guest, Natalya Murakhver, I should have asked you how to pronounce it before we started. Murakhver. Natalya Murakhver fled the Soviet Union in 1977 and is raising children in Mamdani's New York City, only to find that it's worse. She recognizes the impending doom and is trying to warn all of us. Natalya is a filmmaker, producer, and director, including of the documentary Uncancellable, which you can see for free, and we'll tell you how. I saw it. It's amazing. She's also the co-founder and executive director of Restore Childhood, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting children's education, health, and development. And she's the co-author of An Urgent Conversation: What to Know About Children, Gender, and School Policy. So she's a woman after my own heart, except she has even the credentials to compare it to Russia, which, we in America, I mean, like I said, I was born in New York City. I've actually never been to Russia. But we know about it, we hear about it, although not kids in school these days don't really hear about it, the difference between communism and Marxism and socialism and capitalism. But clearly this is a really dangerous, it's like a cancer that is beginning in New York, because Mamdani is a jihadist. And I know that's I know some people are afraid to say that, or that's horrible, I'm an Islamophobe. But as the terrorist therapist, I know about these things, and I am very worried for America, and I try to warn everyone here. But anyhow, today I will leave it to my guest. She can talk about it from firsthand experience, at least in terms of the Marxist communist point of view. So Natalya, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Carole.
You're welcome. So let's just start with the little Natalya coming over. Well, how little were you, or do you not want me to ask? I mean, you came in 1977. So how old were you?
I was 6 when we got here.
Oh, wow. So you were little Natalya. Okay. So first of all, what was it like in Russia? And of course, obviously not great, or you wouldn't have come with your family.
Well, I was 5 when I left, so my memories are really more, the parks and, my hamster. But I only, I hear the things that my parents, the stories that they've told me, and, there's no way to get, out of your rut. Everything is the warmth of collectivism, right? So we're from Odessa, which is now the Ukraine. But it was, my passport was stamped USSR, which is a country that no longer exists. So I speak Russian, but I'm originally from Ukraine and I'm a Jew. So what does that make me? I don't know. An American, I guess. That's what it makes me.
Do you speak Ukrainian also?
No, I only speak Russian. There was only Russian spoken when we
at that
left.
time. Interesting. And tell us about why your family left.
Well, I mean, it was miserable there. My parents would have to, wait on lines to buy the most basic of necessities. We lived in a little tiny one-bedroom hovel, the three of us. It was a place where people were deeply paranoid about speaking freely or sharing anything personal outside of the home because people were always listening and potentially, reporting. It's a very sick society, full of fear and distrust. It's a very low trust society. And so, especially as Jews, the society is even worse for you, as bad as it is for non-Jews, because there were just no opportunities, very difficult to get to a university and get a higher education. And so my parents followed my aunt and my grandmother, who had left to Israel just a few years before that. My parents left in 1977 with me. It was during the Carter-Brezhnev agreement to allow Soviet Jews to leave. And we had, an opportunity to either go to the United States, to Israel, or Australia, and we chose New York. But it was a very slow migration. There were a lot of hurdles to jump through. It was, we first started out in Austria and had to spend several days clearing customs there, and then Ostia outside of Rome in Italy, where we spent about 4.5 months. And then finally, we came here in December 1977 during a great big blizzard and settled into New York City.
Hmm. Well, that sounds, and what kind of work did your father do in Russia?
Yeah, he was a plumber. So part of a plumbing union in Russia. And when he came here, my mother is a bookkeeper, and so they immediately went to work. They just really wanted to seize the opportunity. I mean, they came here for opportunity, not assurances. There were no assurances, and in fact, they couldn't bring anything with them. So there were some aid relief organizations, HIAS and NYANA. HIAS at the time was the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. NYANA was the New York Association for New Americans. So they helped them get settled and find an apartment. And then my father went and started working in incinerators. He had to climb into incinerators to fix them. He used to come home covered in, dirt and soot. It was before OSHA. So the amount of chemicals and
Oh,
asbestos
wow.
he was exposed to, but he never complained. He was happy to get $4 an hour. And eventually he was able to, they both, having worked full time from the moment they got here, were able to raise enough money to buy a house. And then, over the years, helped me go to college and supported me in every way.
Hmm. I can't help thinking how different that is from a lot of the immigrants who come today. That's how it used to be. Um, my my parents' grandparent my parents' grandparents, wait, my parents' parents, my grandparents. I'm just trying to think whether it's
Your
even,
great grandparents or your,
well, I mean, wait a second, not my grandparents, my great grandparents. Yes, my
yeah.
great grandparents. Thank you. My mother's uh, parents came from Russia, and
Mhm.
my father's parents came um, from from Poland. And, of course, they did the same thing. That's how you did it. Nowadays, people come here looking for money, looking for help, looking for what they can get, rather than with the spirit of, we have this opportunity, freedom, and we're going to work our asses off, to make a better life for ourselves.
Mhm.
So, okay. So where did they move to? Where did you live in New York?
You have one guess.
Okay. Well, the Lower East Side,
No, that was a
the,
different
the Bronx,
migration.
the Bronx.
No, sorry. I probably should just tell you, near Brighton Beach, not quite Brighton Beach, Sheepshead
Oh,
Bay,
uh-huh.
Brooklyn. So,
Uh-huh.
Little Odessa.
Oh, huh. Okay, well, I was born in
Mhm.
the Bronx and then I was raised in Queens and then I lived
Yeah.
in Manhattan. So,
Oh,
yes, I never really got that familiar with Brooklyn.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, all their neighbors, everybody was from the
Oh,
Soviet
wow.
Union. So, and there still is a large Eastern European Soviet community down there by the beach. They like it. It's right on the ocean. It
Uh-huh.
reminds them of the Black Sea.
Uh-huh.
It's very popular.
Okay, um, so what are when you were talking at the beginning, um, I was thinking about things that you mentioned a couple of things that made me flash right away to today's New York. For example, you were talking about the stores, grocery stores, where they had to stand in long lines and pay, well, I guess pay a lot of money, but for basics. And of course, Mamdani is making these state grocery stores where he's going to be making cheaper, selling things supposedly for cheaper prices, and then he's going to be putting out of business all the other stores. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, it's the same thing as, freezing the rent, right? Like you're squeezing private business, private land ownership. You're really making collectivism not just warm but hot. So obviously this doesn't work. Well, like it's not like this stuff hasn't been tried like a million times.
Could
It
you
all
explain that more?
well, I mean, other countries, the Soviet Union, where you never owned anything, like it doesn't work. It's all built on a failed premise. Like people need equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. Nobody should ever expect that they should have equality of outcome. In fact, I don't want my children to even think that anything will be handed to them as they get older. Like they have to fight for it. And, obviously there's like a balance, right? You don't want to like leave your kids in the street to like forage for crumbs. But after a certain amount of necessities, the Maslow hierarchy of needs that are met, I think we are creatures who need to compete and need to strive. And what Mamdani's world, does is it kind of neuters everyone and makes it futile to even aspire.
Yes. And, how old are your children?
12 and 16.
Okay. So, between COVID and now Mamdani, kids aren't, now maybe your kids are different, but on the whole, in general, kids are not growing up with this sense of challenge and purpose and aspiration that we used to have, that
Yeah.
that earlier generations had. Um, and that is feeding right into Mamdani's socialism,
Hmm.
because oh well, why, you can just sit sit on your butt and go on the computer all day and you'll just get a monthly allowance.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we're feeding we're feeding a real dysfunction in our children. I mean, they're being raised by parents who are constantly distracted and aren't putting them first. And putting them first doesn't mean providing for every single need your child has. It's about letting them encounter adversity and letting them meet the moment, right? That Lenore Skenazy has written and spoken, ad nauseum about free range kids and how,
uh-huh,
at certain uh, developmental milestones, they need to be allowed to do certain things on their own and fail and maybe encounter some danger, and not just simulations on their phone. So I think that's the problem. Like we have so much leisure time, we have forgotten how to forage for food, how to, build things. The trades are like, not being acquired in the way they used to be. There's no electrics class or plumbing class or whatever,
uh-huh.
culinary class or whatever. And so I think that we're teaching kids the wrong values, and it's feeding a deep, deep unhappiness.
Yes. Now, I don't know if you want to, well, let's, since we're talking about children, I mean, we're going to talk a little bit about your documentary too, but um, So do your children go to public school or private school?
We were in public school up until a couple of years ago, but no longer. At this point, we're not. We reserve the option to, honestly, I don't feel that private schools are a panacea, like not a panacea, but like a perfect solution either. And in theory, I support school choice. In practice, it may not be as much of a choice as you think it is. So, I don't have like rose-colored glasses about that. Right now, they're not in public school, but you never know as things change and different. All these schools are not all the same.
Yes, yes. Well, when we come back, because I want to leave people on a cliffhanger, when we come back, my guest, Natalya Murakhver,
Very good. Great.
um, will tell you about the horrors of public school that caused her to change her children to private school. And if not proud of it, then at least not apologetic about it either.
No.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Welcome back to Dr. Carole's Couch. Now back to the show. Here's Dr. Carole Lieberman.
And welcome back to Dr. Carole's Couch, where we're talking today about leaving Marxist Russia to come to New York City only to find it's worse. And as I promised, my guest, Natalya Murakhver, is going to explain her personal story for why she ended up taking her children out of public school and putting them in private school, which is basically going to expose some of the current problems that there are in these schools under Mamdani.
Well, so this preceded Mamdani. Mamdani is just the latest flavor, in City Hall. We actually had Mayor Adams, who tried to do better on many different fronts, including scratch-based cooking initiatives, and really tried to, prioritize kids to the best of his ability. But unfortunately, New York City is a union town, and the teachers' unions really bear the brunt of the blame here. And of course, they're huge supporters to the Democratic Party. So you see what's happening with the Democratic Party, which is being consumed by socialist, Marxist, Islamists, whatever, the red, green, brown alliance, whatever you want to call them. It's that there are many different names. It's all the same thing. I'm a New York City Democrat, or at least I used to be, still registered as a Democrat, and voted for Obama twice, voted for Biden. And it's New York, right? And I went to NYU and undergrad and grad, and I was part of the film community there, and really, I you know I was very much a lefty, and that was really the only option here for the most part. If you were part of any sort of community, intellectual community, academia. In fact, I've had friends from graduate school completely unfriend me. I just looked on my Facebook and I was like,
Yeah.
where is that person whose wife's benefit we went to when she was running for, something or other? And it's like, oh, wow, he unfriended me. That's that after 20 something years. That's really very liberal of him.
And
Um,
wait. And why did he unfriend you? Because you were
I think the last couple of years, I mean, I voted for Trump. I think Trump actually is one of the best presidents, if not the best president this country has had.
I agree with
Um,
you.
and by the way, I had terrible Trump derangement syndrome, the worst. Like I thought he was the devil.
So how
Um,
did you get cured?
School closures. Yeah,
What do you mean?
the unions were incredibly helpful in helping me understand. I mean, when schools closed I have another film, a feature film called 15 Days, the real story of America's school closures and America's pandemic school closures. When schools closed and I realized that my party was actually not the good guys, um,
Uh-huh.
and that Trump, he tried to reopen schools. Um, it was really bizarre to suddenly, in 2020, get emails from a Republican representatives like Virginia Fox and others who were holding town halls, virtual town halls at the time, to talk about school reopening when all the Democrats wanted to do was talk about resources to the
Huh.
teachers' unions. And vaccine mandates and masks on toddlers. It was just a really bizarre like shifting of understanding. It was like, wait a second, hold on a minute. And I even did vote for Biden in 2020 because at the time he said that his priority was reopening the schools.
Uh-huh.
And I believed him and I voted for him and I celebrated when he won. I was also still very much beholden to identity politics. I was not awakened by BLM. I bought into the fact that America was a fundamentally racist country and that we did need to do
Really?
something drastic. I did.
But where did you get that from?
The media, academia, I
I
guess
mean,
white.
when you were in college, was that what they were saying when you were going there?
I don't think they say that, right? I mean,
Well, they
academia,
do now. They say
right?
it
But
now.
now they do. It's there. The Overton window has shifted in like what you can say and what you can't
Uh-huh.
say, right? No, I think when I went to college, it was a lot more subtle. But there is a critical studies lens through which much of, academia is filtered through, whether it's equitable, food systems or whatever. I mean, I have a master's degree in food studies,
Hmm.
and our program was very equity focused. And at the time, I mean, in theory, all these things sound like a good idea. It all sounds like a good idea until you try it in practice and realize it's the worst idea. It doesn't work. So, I feel like the progressive left is very good at mastering very nice language. And it always makes you feel good to say and, to virtue signal and say you're doing all these things. And I was one of the people who, when Obama won, I thought, okay, great, we've absolved ourselves of the sin.
Uh-huh.
We now
Uh-huh.
have a black leader. You see,
Uh-huh.
this country is not racist. We have a black leader, and we're good now. Like things are going to be
Uh-huh.
okay. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, he looked good. He sounded good. The artwork was great.
Yes, he
It's
was the most. He was the most. He was the worst, in my opinion. He was the worst president we ever had. But in particular, in regard to helping terrorists,
yes,
and Iran in particular.
yes.
So,
Well, yes. When he gave the $6 billion to Iran, it was like, and it was just like, what? But meanwhile, Trump is vilified, including by the American Jewish community, who just refuses to look at the fact that Trump and Kushner negotiated the Abraham Accords, and that's probably the most promising thing that anyone
yes,
has ever done for the Middle East, for both the Arabs and the Israelis, that would
yes,
probably free them of this vicious cycle of, murder and, crazy, indoctrination in the young. Like if the Abraham Accords actually came to fruition and more countries signed on, you would
yes,
have the Golda Meir, statement, when the Arabs love their children and the future more than they want to kill ours, then
yes,
we can have a good, joyful, peaceful coexistence.
yes, yes.
So all of that anyway, but yeah, I definitely believed in BLM. I thought Trump was the
Uh,
devil, and but as an evidence-based person, I'm a critical thinker. I, also couldn't ignore what was unfolding in front of me, and I organized a lawsuit to reopen the schools in New York City against Mayor
oh
Bill de
wow.
Blasio. Yeah, no one else did that. I did it. My lawyer was a Trump voter. And the first question that the Gothamist reporter who came to cover the filing of the case asked him was, did you vote? So you're a Trumper, or you voted for Trump? And it was like April 2021. And that was a bizarre and horrible thing to say to somebody on the streets of downtown Manhattan. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, like, we're here to file a lawsuit to reopen the
Uh-huh.
schools. And this
Uh-huh.
lawyer, the only lawyer that will take this case on, and there are very, very few in this country, by the way,
Yeah.
most would not touch it because law firms are progressive and they won't touch these types of cases. The libertarian law firms also wanted nothing to do with it. I spoke to Pacific Legal and others. They wanted nothing to do with liberating the kids. Nothing.
Oh,
They wouldn't touch any of these cases. And but this lawyer did. And it was just, wait a second. He's being belittled for voting for Trump. Is Trump really so bad? I mean, I think that might have been one flicker, but
I
also
see.
just, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of things that happened. And also, I mean, we saw who Kamala Harris was, and Biden, and I mean, everything they did in terms of gender ideology and trying to, say, Biden's famous quote, they're not your children, they're our children. Like everyone's our
Mhm.
children. It's like, no, they're not your
Yeah, yeah.
children and they never will be. So it just, the cozy relationship between the Democratic presidential administration and the teachers unions, who were the bad guys in all of this, made it pretty clear that much of what Trump had said was actually true.
Uh-huh. Okay, so let's talk about your children and what you were seeing on a daily basis that scared the bejesus out of you and made you take them to private school.
Well, there were a lot of things that happened. I mean, this wasn't a thin, like a straight line. But in seventh grade, no, in sixth grade, my middle schooler came home from a very good public school in New York City and said that on the first day of school, they asked them what their pronouns were. And so that was so that was 4 years ago.
Hmm.
So that was what, 2022. Of course, like my fight to reopen the schools gave me an incredible like sliver of light into what was happening, in the whole school
Uh-huh.
system. So it was a tough fight, and it was very, very stressful.
I guess I
But
should ask you, did you win? I mean, what did that accomplish?
It got a lot of press, so that it put pressure on de Blasio's administration to reopen schools. We were demanding that schools reopen in the fall of 2021 with teachers in every classroom 5 days a week and no Zoom in a room. Because up until that point, they were really punishing middle and high schools where the teachers were Zooming in and the kids were sitting there staring into screens with masks on and 6 or 8 feet apart. So we wanted teachers in every classroom. But
Mhm.
may you get what you wish for, because now you have socialist teacher, DSA teachers in every classroom. Like if I could, go back to 2020, maybe I wouldn't have sued, and maybe I would have just said, you know what, you closed the schools, let's keep them closed. You know, they really got a big boost out of parents like
Uh-huh.
me fighting to reopen them. And maybe I wasn't that smart, but
Well, so did it reopen them? I mean,
yeah,
did
well, so at that time, so it was an emergency like case, like a Article 78 or something, and it was supposed to be heard within 2 weeks, but they stalled, and the time ran out, and school ended that year in June of 2021, and so we ended up having the actual hearing in July, and that was a virtual hearing. And at that time, there was a new variant, and it was in the New York Times. And the judge was like, well, I've been reading all the research in the New York Times. And I was like, oh my God, once you say research in Times, like, it's over. And
Yeah.
so he basically said, at that time, the mayor's office had already said that they were going to reopen the schools in person with no Zoom in a room, like
Uh-huh.
whether it was because of pressure from me or that was what the unions wanted at that point, they said they were going to do it. So the judge said, well, they're going to do what you asked them to do.
Uh-huh.
So there's no ruling I have to make, but they need to reserve the possibility that they'd have to close them again, because I'm not a doctor. I can't decide like whether
Huh.
Omicron. So he said, if they close them again and it's unjust, you can bring the case again. Well,
Uh-huh.
yeah. So,
Well, so you
um,
did really have a lot of influence.
I mean, who knows? Like, I'm not part of the playbook, right? Like, the case is the case. Like, whatever impact it had, it had City Hall paying attention because they sent a lawyer, their lawyer, De Blasio's lawyer, the union's lawyer, whoever she was.
Uh-huh.
But ultimately, I have to believe that they were prepared to reopen in full because the teachers union had moved on to other things. They had gotten,
Uh-huh.
their $189.5 billion in extortion funds. The money had vested. So I don't know. I don't know what influence I had. I did what I had to do. It was the right thing to do. We had lots of plaintiffs, lots of families that signed on.
Oh,
One
wow.
of the families who signed on was the psychiatrist, Melanie Schwartz from Brooklyn, who was a psychiatrist, I think, at Maimonides Medical Center. And she had twins who were at Brooklyn Tech High School at the time and were suffering terribly. She tried everything she could. But unfortunately, a few years later, last year, her son killed himself, and she was never able to save him. One of the twins is still with us, and the other one isn't. And the film that I made, 15 Days, is dedicated to Noah Sylvester. But I
Huh.
couldn't save him, and neither could Melanie. And, something she'll never get
You,
over for the rest of her life.
you mean, so she was saying that the closure of the schools were having this devastating impact. I wrote a lot of op-eds about that when
Yeah,
COVID was happening, about the
yeah.
devastation on kids. But that is so sad. Did she not bring him to
She did everything.
a
She did.
psychiatrist?
She did everything. She did everything. His school had no, in-person academics. There was no sports. He wasn't able to see his friends. It's a very woke part of Brooklyn,
Mm.
and an already vulnerable young man who was suddenly cut off from everything. You can imagine it was hard for mentally stable children, but for children who already have some
Yes.
challenges,
Yeah.
it can, they're young, their hormones are raging, and suddenly they think it's the end of the world. And no, she did everything. She's a wonderful, wonderful person. She was a plaintiff on our lawsuit. She spoke out. I think she wrote an article. She did everything she could. It's not her fault.
No, I'm not blaming her. It's just so sad.
Yeah,
Um, so okay, so tell me, let's getting back to your kids. So you were starting to say your daughter went into school and the first thing they did was ask about pronouns.
that
And
was
then
sixth grade. Yeah.
six, yes. And what she came home and she said what to you?
She just reported it. I was just, so, I mean, because I had already, kind of knew what was happening, it was easy for me to educate my kids about this. I said, well, they're going to ask you this. This is insane. Like, dismiss it. And, they learned everything they needed to at home. So my kids, I'd like to say, are not indoctrinatable. So by seventh grade, when she went to, was it like phys ed or gym or sex ed or something, and the teacher started talking about AFABs and AMABs. That was another weird experience. Do you know what those are?
A fat no.
Okay. Us boys are AMABs, they're assigned male at birth. So girls are AFABs, they're assigned female at birth.
Oh my God. Okay. How did I miss that? I thought I knew everything about these things.
Yeah, that's
Oh
how they
wow.
taught them. Yeah. So, I mean, not good.
So
uh,
like when they would come home and tell you these things, would they be laughing or would they be bothered by it
They'd just be like,
or
it's so weird. But there are kids who didn't come home and tell their parents this and just
right,
assumed that their teachers were right.
right.
So, I mean, it didn't particularly concern me for my kids. It made me worried about their peers, and rightly so, because I saw their peers. So,
Uh-huh.
But yeah, no, I mean, I didn't really worry about my kids because I literally sat here and talked to them about everything ad nauseum at the dinner table. And they also have my parents who can tell them about, the Soviet Union. So they have a unique window into the very
Uh-huh.
not distant past. And they hear about my immigrant experience. And also I'm just, a very outspoken person. I feel like everything should be discussed because if you don't educate your kids, then they will. So
Right.
you better take charge. So it was
So,
actually, the school closures were kind of helpful for me because they showed me what was happening inside. They cracked everything open.
yes, yes. I say that that's the that's the silver lining of COVID, that it got parents to realize what was being taught in school so that we could fight back. So okay, we just have a couple of minutes left in this segment. So what else? Like, so what finally did it? What else happened that finally got you to take them out of public school?
October 7th.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right after October 7th, we had like threats against public schools here. I remember it was, maybe a month later, and there were like bomb threats against the elementary school. I can't remember exactly what they were. And I remember texting with other parents, like, should we send them in? Is it real? Is it fake? Like, what's going on? But it was very grim and dark very quickly. And I think it's important for kids to have religious education because, in the absence of religion, there is ideology. Some would argue religion is ideology,
Mhm.
maybe, but you got to give kids something to believe in. And so we migrated to schools with religious, backbones.
Hmm. But the school, like you were saying, these threats, bomb threats and all that. I mean, were your kids going to a, like, why did they, were your kids, the public school wasn't religious,
No,
was
but the
identity?
public schools, there was like a day when like they threatened, like the unions were doing all sorts of like walkouts in the schools against genocide, the fake genocide in Gaza or whatever. But there were also threats against public schools right after October 7th, like
Just regular public schools, like they didn't know
regular public schools.
how many Jewish students were in that particular
Not
school.
about, yeah, not about Jews specifically. It was after October 7th, and like, people were calling in threat. I don't know, but it was suddenly like a kind of a scary environment. And
Wow.
but I mean, October 7th, but even beyond the threats, they weren't really the propellant for this. It was more about not running away from something, but seeking something more.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, we need to take a break now. I agree with your thinking 100%. Well, I haven't heard all your thinking, but except for Obama, but you changed.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we need to take a break. My guest is Natalya Murakhver, and the movie will tell you about Uncancelable, and
Mhm.
also the book, An Urgent Conversation: What to Know About Children, Gender, and School Policy. So stay. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. Now back to the show. Here's Dr. Carole Lieberman.
And welcome back to Dr. Carol's Couch. I'm your psychiatrist host, Dr. Carole Lieberman. We're talking today about leaving Marxist Russia to come to New York City only to find it's worse. And my guest is Natalya Murakhver. And we were just talking about her own children and what they were doing in the schools that got her to in the public schools to get her to finally take children out and send them to public school. And, and I know what you were saying, that it wasn't like fleeing from, it was fleeing to. And I totally, it is so sad, our children are growing up not only with a lack of purpose and a lack of ambition and like the idea that it's not worth it to work your tush off to get something that you want, but and so feeling sort of empty, but also a part of this is a lack of religion, because when COVID happened, and people certainly in California, and I know in a lot of other places, churches and synagogues weren't allowed to be open for services during COVID. And that has done, I think if I had to pick one thing, I mean, COVID did a lot of things to destroy America. I really think it was absolutely engineered to do that. But in addition, what I think one of the worst things that it did is to take families out of the habit of going to their place of worship every week and in involving their kids in their religion. Because, yes, my temple, for example, did have Zoom services, and I know a lot of other places of worship did Zoom, but Zoom is not quite, and God is all over, even when you're in the bathroom. But it's not the same thing as being in a house of worship and with other congregants and all that, to be back in touch with your religion. So why don't you take it from there?
Oh, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I think, was it Dennis Prager said? He said something like, I'm not arguing for belief in God, I'm arguing for the need for belief in God, which I
Uh-huh.
think, I don't argue for religion, I argue for the need for religion.
Yes.
I mean, and that's acknowledging basic human nature. Like we're not good at having to make too many choices at every step of the road. It is good to have the 10 commandments and to have like a shorthand, especially nowadays. This is what you can do, this is what you can't do. And it also keeps, the state from being, too involved in what you're doing, because you're raised with this vertebrae, like this backbone
Right.
of things you should do. And, you're going to veer a little bit, into the gray areas. It's not meant to tell you everything and shouldn't be that way anyway. But we can't have no guardrails. I'm sorry. Like Woody Allen was right. He said, we're a failed species. And I absolutely agree with that.
So in Russia or Odessa, um, what was it like in terms of religion? I mean, I know Jews were, well, why don't you just tell us?
I didn't live there as a cognizant person who knew anything about religion, but
What do your
look,
parents tell you?
yeah, I mean, we had a New Year's bush, let's put it that way. Um, that's the Christians didn't really have a Christmas tree. We definitely had no idea what a menorah was, or Sabbath candles. But we did have a New Year's bush, and it's kind of like this neutering, this generic kind of godless religion, which I think ultimately is what I've been brought up with, even though, culturally super Jewish and very much a Zionist and 100%, very aligned with Israel as well. But, in terms of having a synagogue to go to, or rabbis, or really active, Jewish community, that was definitely not something we had.
Well, but when your parents were growing up, did they have it?
No, no. I mean, I think it was stuff that happened in the home. I think they tried that so first of all, they like escaped the Holocaust. My father was born in 1939 and my mother was born in 1941, all like in the Odessa area. And both of them lost their fathers before they ever knew them. So raised by mothers who, were trying to just keep them alive and running from place to place. So yeah, there was no real time or resources or any sort of like center where they were practicing. I mean, I think they always very much identified as proud Jews, and there were certain things like my mother, I know, never wanted to mix meat and milk. So, you know, certain
Well,
things
where did they learn that?
from their mothers,
So it was all in the home for all
all in the home. Yeah, all in the home. And you know, if there were families or cousins or things like, you know, that type of like, you know, family around. But no, I've never heard of anybody going to a synagogue, or, you know, there was Yiddish spoken in the home, so that probably helped a little bit, but certainly not Hebrew.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, that's that's my mother might be able to tell you more if you want to have her on. She's available. She's a very good interview. But that there, you know, there was no organized religion. I've never heard of my parents going to any sort of services ever before they came to the United States.
Hmm.
I'm not saying other people didn't, you know, I don't know what
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
Natan Sharansky had access to prior to being interned, but my parents did not.
uh-huh. Hmm. That's that's interesting. So okay, so you moved your children to a private Jewish school?
One of them goes to a Jewish school, one of them goes to a Catholic high school.
Interesting. How did that come about?
They were just the best options we had.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really like an issue-oriented person. You know, brands mean very little to me. So I just look at, you know, what does this institution actually have to offer? And then, you know, we make those
Uh-huh.
decisions.
Uh-huh. So, so like okay, so what was the worst before you moved them? What was the worst thing? I mean, besides I guess the bombs, the bomb threats, but then what? Like, what about like you were in your book, what to know, urgent conversation, what to know about children,
Yeah.
gender, and school policy. I mean, when the kids came back from COVID, that was the teacher's opportunity to get them to believe that if their problem, whatever the problems they're unhappy, whatever their problems are, I know what the solution is. If you're a boy, you have to change to be a girl, and if you're a girl, you have to change to be a boy. And that's how they got all of them to become trans and other sexual identities. Were your children, did teachers talk to your children about that?
I mean, not, I mean, what I told you basically, but I think, you know, the toolkit that we created, it's my nonprofit called Restore Childhood. We released that about just over 2 years ago. So it's slightly out of date. Well, actually more than slightly. And we are going to revise it and release it again because with Trump's second administration, he's definitely made some very welcome changes, some as executive orders that will need to, you know, be turned into laws, because otherwise the next Democrat who comes in, you know, strikes off the executive orders and everything, you know, is lost. But the toolkit really gives you kind of a look at what the gender landscape looks like, both on an educational basis, but also on the evidence, you know, what evidence exists that is being used against parents to tell them, would you like a dead daughter? Would you rather have a dead daughter or a live son, to coerce them, to get them
Right,
to,
right.
you know, to assent to assent to their children being mutilated, essentially. And so that's
But
something.
didn't teachers talk to your children about like, the
No,
boy
no.
would,
I mean, as I said, there's different schools. Different schools have, you know, you really you can talk about the public schools for sure. I don't. It's not quite like that. Like, I don't think it's every teacher who's doing it. Like,
no, but
there it's I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it's not, that's too broad a brush to paint it all with. I mean, there still are quite excellent teachers in the public schools that have been teaching for 20, 30 years. Our principal who ran our elementary school was absolutely not on board with any of this, and was was
Sure. I'm not
probably,
saying that every teacher is like
yeah,
that, but far too many are. I mean, because that's why we have this groundswell of all these different sexual identities. Now, and whenever I talk about this, um, I like to make a statement that it's one thing, there are authentic children who are authentically gay or lesbian or even trans. But that's not what I'm talking about, and that comes from the hormones that are in their mother's body when they're in the uterus, and also from the early relationships that the child has with their mother and father. Okay. But that I'm not talking about the natural, authentic tendencies to or
yeah, I know, I understand. Yeah,
but I'm talking about the kids who have been sort of talked into it, who have been uh,
sure.
given this propaganda and so on.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
there are way too many of them, and the medical complex. Doctors were all too happy, and hospitals were all too happy to have give surgery and hormones, and it was a boon for them. It was extra money, or it was I mean, especially at a time when insurance companies are paying doctors in general very little. So, oh, we have this new thing. We can we can give them hormones, and then we can give them surgery, and then we can, So, and it's child abuse, in my opinion. I've done lots of interviews about this, um, and and yes, it's really good that Trump has cut off some of the money for these streams, for these programs. Um, wow, it's 1:53 already. Oh my goodness. Anyhow, but so I was just wondering about how, I mean, it's good that they weren't that aggressive towards your children.
but again, our experiences are very, very narrow. Like there were, we were in certain classrooms in certain schools. You certainly will find a very different experience at a school, downtown, like the School of the Future, which is a public progressive school, in downtown Manhattan, where even as long ago as 5 or 6 years ago, an acquaintance said that her son came home so confused about gender that he asked her if he could be anything, could he be a car? And he was in
Uh-huh.
sixth grade. So, I mean, it's
Uh-huh.
that's what I'm saying. Like every single school is a fiefdom, and depending on where the principal stands and how long the teachers who have been teaching there, have stayed there, whether they're
Yeah.
older teachers or young teachers who've been DSA trained, you're going to have a very different experience because ultimately those teachers do have control of their classrooms. So you could be talking to somebody who's had a completely different experience. Like for instance, our elementary school never had a Pride Day, not a Pride Month. So you'd
Okay.
go into a different school at my friends' kids go to in June, 2024, 2025, and you'd see like all this, propaganda.
Uh-huh.
You'd go to our elementary school and you'd still have like the book of the month. So it's very, very
Uh-huh.
uneven. It can be
Uh-huh.
anything.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay, well, we only have like 3 minutes left, so please tell people first of all where they can go see um the film Uncancelable. It was great. It's really something that people have to see.
Sure, thank you. So it's on Real Clear Politics on their YouTube, but we also have it. We have a Substack, Real Restore Childhood Substack, and we have links to all of our work there, both Uncancelable and my other film, 15 Days, the real story of the pandemic, school closures, the toolkit, and all the other work that we do as a nonprofit. So you can find that. That's kind of the hub.
Okay, that sounds good. All right. Well, and concluding remarks. I mean, what do you see? Well, I know which I was going to say. What do you see next? But next is updating the urgent conversation, right?
Well, that's one of the things. I mean, I'm doing a lot of things. I'm also producing a documentary about the Texas whistleblower, Dr. Eitan Haim. If we're talking about gender, he was the Texas surgeon who blew the whistle on Texas Children's Hospital and their surgeries and procedures on children as young as
Ah,
11 years old. So I'm producing the film, and Eli Steele, who directed Killing America and the forthcoming White Guilt, based on his father's book, White Guilt, Shelby Steele. He's directing it. So that is our next big project.
oh, that sounds great. That's really good.
Yeah.
Um, Well, can't keep a good woman down. And we don't want to. So everybody go to the Substack and thank you so much for being on Dr. Carole's Couch. And thank you all for listening and watching.